While we are waiting for your presentation to appear on screen, I can introduce you by reading the first paragraph of your biography, which we have on the conference website. Dr. George Cremona is Senior Lecturer and Coordinator for German programs offered by the Faculty of Education at the University of Malta. He lectures in German language teaching methodology and gives lectures about multimodality. He also coordinates the media literacy VET programs of the Faculty of Education. Dr. Cremona is also the Faculty of Education Erasmus coordinator. And the title of Dr. Cremona's presentation today is Authentic Radio Clips and Their Pedagogical Value to Teaching Listening Skills Within Native Language Learning Contexts, a Critical Multimodal Research Venture. Thank you, George. The screen is all yours.
Thank you very much for this warm introduction with a smile. I appreciate that. Basically, I would like to welcome all those online and also those who are in Florence right now. I would have wished to be there in Florence, but because of the situation, I couldn't make it there. But I admire all those who managed to be there. So today I am going to focus on the part of my teaching where I also do work with teachers of our native language. I mean Maltese, the first language in Malta, the L1 in Malta, and I would like to focus on what literature calls the Cinderella skill in language learning, in the language learning context. Basically, we are talking about the listening skill while speaking, while reading, and while writing. In some way or another are given due importance. Speaking, writing, and reading are there at some grade or another. At the same time, literature indicates that listening has always been considered to be the Cinderella skill, almost left out. The few who did include the teaching of L1 language learning skills did so adopting one of these 5 theoretical frameworks, either effective, either top-down, bottom-up, interactive, or else autonomous. We need also to point out that existent literature also suggests that, for example, Conte and Smith suggest and point out that most teachers suggest and voice out their concern that they find very limited resources, pedagogical resources they can use to teach L1 listening skills with their classrooms. So what I am going to share today are the outcomes from a research venture on two scales. First and foremost, on experiences I have collected from since 2013, when I was trusted by the faculty to teach, to contribute in the back then the Bachelor of Education, and now it's the Masters in Teaching and Learning for Maltese teachers, those who aspire to be Maltese teachers of Maltese. Maltese is our language in our tiny island called Malta, which is located near, not very far from Italy. I should have explained that before. Sorry for that. And basically, I also am going to share so insights from those experiences which I have gained since 2013, and also these insights from an experience I had when back in January 2021 I was invited to give a CPD in a school here in Malta, and the teachers I was working with, first and foremost, showed frustration when I asked them, how can I be of help before preparing the CPD? At the preparation stage, I asked, what are your concerns? And they voiced out frustration about no resources while teaching listening skills. At the same time, since I also produce and present a weekly radio program on national radio here in Malta, I was like challenged by these teachers, and they asked me, can you maybe help us through these resources which you eventually produce? And so the main research question came out: can authentic radio clips serve as adequate pedagogical tools for the teaching and of listening within the L1 language classroom? So basically, step one was I started by doing a socio-semiotic multimodal interpretation of 150 6-minute radio clips broadcasting during the show I present, Nejdu Kalma, on Calypso Radio in Malta. And this was done adopting a theoretical framework based on 6 main steps, also focusing on the initial interpretation of these clips, then moving on to the multimodal socio-semiotic interpretation, and then moving on to the social elements these clips present. So after that, what we came out with, I should also remind you that this request to work with these clips came out from these teachers. So I followed what these teachers really suggested. So after this, we ended up with 50 clips, 50 audio clips. I gave these clips to these teachers, and I asked them, we worked together, they chose as many clips as they wanted, and then after selecting them, they used them in class, and then they did an evaluation of how it turned out to be, while eventually teaching listening skills to these native language students. So these are the results and the discussions. To start with, the results indicate that the 6 teachers participating in these research in this research venture were all very willing to teach listening skills. So it's the reason why listening is not being included. Of course, I can't generalize. I'm talking about this case study I did, but from this case study, we can indicate that teachers are willing to teach listening skills. What about radio clips? Teachers were amazed how 11 to 15-year-olds, because we're talking about secondary school students here, were very interested in radio. And this also confirms, while our perception maybe is that 11 to 15-year-olds are not very keen to follow radio, this confirms as well results from which repeatedly come out in the National Broadcasting Survey by the National Broadcasting Authority here in Malta, which confirms that 11 to 18-year-olds listen to radio, and actually one of the top 3 radio stations currently featuring in at times in first, second, or third place is a radio station which aims at this younger generation. So result number 1, teachers do actually were willing to teach listening skills. Secondly, we move on to the second result, and this reminded me of while this morning I was listening to the opening keynote speech by Dr. Mario Pac, my colleague at the University of Malta, who I thank for the insights shared. Teachers were concerned about the technical constraints they have. Mario mentioned this, like the technical help which educators need. And yes, teachers wanted further information about, first and foremost, from where can we get these clips? And secondly, also, how can we work with them? As one teacher actually wrote in her evaluation, this experience taught me that that never considering radio material available was my weakness. I used to think about audio-visual clips, particularly from YouTube and online. However, audio productions from Maltese local radio stations were rarely a resource I thought about. And with this also, when one needs editing, because when one finds these resources, it's not always, you can't always use them as you find them. So this technical support was required according to what teachers said. There are also other constraints which teachers mentioned. Challenges include time-related challenges because of the very vast syllabus, the financial matters they require also to produce or to edit or to prepare these resources. And with this as well, teachers pointed out that it would be helpful as well if even at during similar CPDs as we were doing, and also during their teacher education course at university, these ideas could be shared and mentioned. One final result which comes out is teachers also identified, we had some teachers who were both teaching in Maltese and another foreign language, and teachers made a distinction between how difficult it is to teach listening, okay, in a foreign language context, but there, as this teacher 5 indicated in his field notes, this quote explains it all. Being our native language, Maltese, makes it even more difficult to know how to teach it, because as a teacher, one asks, how did I learn how to listen? And how would I teach it to my students in class? Definitely not an easy task. And that brings us to our conclusions. As a main conclusion from these research ventures I presented today, in order not to leave it as a difficult task, maybe to make it a bit more light and a bit more manageable, I'm going to share with you 10 tips which come out from this research venture, and which eventually are practical tips for those like myself and many others who intend to teach listening skills in L1 language context. So to start with, the outcomes of the study indicates that one should not rush to conclusions, in a sense that there are so many resources one can use that one should always ask. When one has a resource at hand, one should also always ask, should I use this or not? The reaction would be, teachers suggested that when they find something, they rush into conclusions and they start thinking how to use it. Actually, this research venture showed that no, don't rush. Before think, should I use this or not? There are so many other ventures, so many other venues one can use that do not rush while choosing your resources. Secondly, distinguish between authentic resources and audio clips. Audio clips are those designed specifically for the classroom, and authentic resources including any other material, as I just mentioned, like radio clips and other sources which were never intended to be in class. The third clip is to determine, to choose what should determine this choice. And what should determine the choice are basically three main things. First and foremost, the aim of the lesson, what you intend to do through that aim. Secondly, the target audience. The target audience, one should always remember that we are working with L1 students, okay, native speakers of Maltese, okay, and these learners are native speakers, L1 speakers, who are in a context where Maltese is being spoken, and thus they are familiar to this language. So the fourth determining factor is the target audience. Okay, those who are asking, I already explained, but I will explain again. Yes, it is L1, and the levels are between 11 to 15-year-old secondary level. And that's why that's a very good question about the levels. The levels are, when I'm talking about target audiences, one should keep in mind also the age of the students. If I'm teaching a 15-year-old and an 11-year-old, I should treat that as differently depending on the resources I teach. Language levels, of course, these are L1 levels, and I'm answering, not talking. I'm seeing the chat as well. Thank you for the text. Thank you, Laura, and thank you as well, Neboisa. So, point number 5 is also the quality of the text, because not everything you find on radio, for example, has a good quality. You need to be sure that if you are going to play something in class, basically, or if you are going to use a resource, you need eventually to have a good quality sound. Otherwise, you will be wasting the students' time. Point number 6 is where to use it in the lesson. Should I use it as an introductory activity? Should I use it to reinforce? Or should I use it as a concluding, during a concluding activity? Furthermore, point number 7, these are all practical tips of which comes out from this research venture. Communicative skills and task-based learning. One needs to use these resources, putting language in a context and also involving students directly throughout the lesson, not sitting there passively, but also actively involved throughout the whole lesson. One other point is as well the point that what should determine whether I use these clips only as sound or else I add other modes. Should I use this clip just for the listening sake of it, or also I can add to it visuals or add to it sound or add to it other modes, including gestures, including mode, including clothes, including color. That is also determined according to the learning objectives, to the learning outcomes, and also to the lesson aim. One final main point which comes out is remember that variety is the spice of life. Keeping in mind that repeating an audio clip does not always work. students frequently switch off once they listen to an audio clip over and over again. Secondly, avoid using long audio clips. Short clips help students maintain their attention span. And finally, there are so many genres. Today I only spoke about radio clips, but there is so much variety, like for example, phone-ins, interviews, competitions, news, adverts, that repetition is easily avoided. And these are the references, and thank you for your kind attention. Grazie per l'attenzione.